If you want to stay up to date with all current hip-hop events and releases, make sure to subscribe and become part of this community. Oh, and also, go cop that fresh merch and listen to my new album in the description. Alright, my man Anderson .Paak just did something that I want to talk about because I think it's very interesting. It's something that I've talked about in the past also quite a bit. It's something that we recently saw again pop up with that Pop Smoke Faith album. So let's talk about what he did, what he said, what he, well, didn't say. He got a tattoo, but let's look into this. So Anderson .Paak took to social media to post a new tattoo that he had got himself. You know, he got some new ink done and he has it on his forearm, and it's a text that reads, "When I'm gone, please don't release any posthumous albums or songs with my name attached. Those were just demos and never intended to be heard by the public." This is very interesting. This is again the topic of posthumous releases, of whether it's actually the artist's intention and their will that those songs that they never put out themselves actually get put out. This discussion first started happening, I mean, don't get me wrong, there were posthumous, Tupac and Biggie releases, of course, but the conversation really started popping back up back when Lil Peep passed away for once, and then also especially with XXXTentacion, because his posthumous releases were not that good, and a lot of people really blamed his estate, his, label after he passed away, for putting those out, and blamed them for just doing it for the money, doing it to just, grab a little bit of cash out of the listeners' pockets, that it was never actually his intention for those songs to be heard by the public. And that, of course, is not a good thing. An artist has their own creative will. They create something with a certain intention for people to hear it, and if that intention is not kept, then only part of the art is actually still there in its full power. That's at least the way that I see it. And we also had this conversation pop back up with, for example, Mac Miller, who had a posthumous release with Circles that was actually pretty good. Before that, we got that X Skins and then Bad Vibes Forever project that were really not it. A lot of just, half songs with him just doing a verse, the rest being filled in by features. Sometimes the audio quality is really bad, and you can tell this was like recorded on a phone as like a demo or just an idea, and his estate is then just gathering everything that there was and putting it out, because they may think the fans want it, but let's be real, they're doing it for the money. And the problem with this is that after a person passes away, or an artist in this case, the full right of what happens to the stuff that he still had and how it's handled in terms of releasing and publishing it is transferred to his estate, which is most of the times his family, if he still has family, or also the labels can have some sort of demand that they can also utter in there. So the way that Anderson .Paak now handled this is by tattooing on his body that he doesn't want any posthumous releases to be released after his death. And by that, he is obviously setting a clear statement and saying, yo, after I've seen everything that went on with, especially that second posthumous Pop Smoke album, Faith, he doesn't want his music and his legacy to be treated in the same way that it did for Pop Smoke on that new album. Now, there were also, of course, some very interesting comments that people made, especially referring to that Pop Smoke album, because that is the latest example of a posthumous release, and a posthumous release that people were very critical about that we have. And I want to show you guys some voices as to what people said about that release and how they then, transfer that to this new statement that we got from Anderson. One person on the Genius article for this said, I mean, no lies were spoken here. While I love Dua Lipa and the song Demeanor, I feel guilty every time I listen to it. He wanted Bruno Mars on the record. If he declined, they should have never dropped the record. I don't think they even reached out. He got Dua, and if Wu was alive, there would be no way that they would have actually done a collaboration. I'm not saying it's Dua's fault. The label would have had to reach out to her to do the song most likely, but it's exploitation. Exploiting a dead artist for money and bringing some cash in off his name. They've gathered two different audiences for one song. That's gotta be serious money. It's all about the wallet, but not the legacy. If they cared about the legacy, they would have also get the money. They dropped one and dropped the ball on everything. I love the way they handled Mac and Peep. They kept solo songs, but the way they did X, Pop Smoke's second album, and others is just terrible. example. Pop barely had any solo songs. Most were interludes and songs shorter than 2.5 minutes. The industry's effed up, period. Anderson is completely right to feel that way. And this pretty clearly also, reflects how I feel about this. While of course I wasn't, too critical about that Pop Smoke album, I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. I thought that they did the best they could. But before it even dropped, I expressed a lot of worry about whether this was just going to be some exploitation, whether it's just, milking his legacy, draining everything that he had without actually getting his intention on this. Of course, young artists like X and Pop never really expected to pass at such an early age, rest in peace. So they never really made it clear how they wanted their legacy to be handled, and I think that's a problem with this. If we have older artists, I'm thinking someone like Jay-Z, someone like Kanye, they have some sort of contract, some sort of clear statement as to what happens to their legacy, very, very obviously, very clearly. But these young artists that unfortunately we see in hip-hop, a lot of them they never really handled it that way, and it's really bold, I think, for someone like Anderson .Paak to even, confront himself with the reality of this if he dies, that no song should be released. He is obviously facing his own mortality, thinking about like, yo, I'm not going to be here forever. What's going to happen to the stuff that I still have recorded, to the stuff that I still would have wanted to put out? And he's reflecting on that, thinking about what's going to happen to that. And I think that's a very bold move. And I think a lot of artists should take an example from this and think about their own mortality and what's going to happen to their legacy as well. But I completely agree with him. It's his choice, after all, what's going to happen to the stuff that he did during his lifetime and not that of his estate. And I mean, when he has it inked down on his arm, then that's pretty official. I think he had probably also has some paperwork done in the background, but he wants to make it clear that is his stance on this discussion. We've seen this discussion pop up, as I said, quite frequently over the past couple of weeks because of that Pop Smoke album. The first one was still pretty good, Shoot for the Stars, Aim for the Moon, because a lot of the songs he actually worked on. But the second one, it was just filled with features, just filler hooks, filler verses and stuff like that, so I didn't really like it. But hey, that's my thoughts on this. I know this is a heated discussion. This is somewhat of a divide and how people stand on this, but I want to know what you specifically think about this. How do you feel about artists' legacy, the way that their discography is preserved by their estate or their label? What do you think about Anderson .Paak's stance on this? What do you think about that Pop Smoke Faith album? Do you think they handle his legacy the right way? How do you feel about other examples of this? Mac Miller, Lil Peep, Nipsey Hussle, XXXTentacion. What do you think about that? Let me know in the comments down below. If you watched this video to the end and liked it, and you want to stay up to date with all current hip-hop events and releases, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, hit that like button, and go follow my social media and blog down in the description. It really helps me out. Until the next one, y'all have an incredible day, and y'all take care.